But that got me into thinking about sort of celibacy, staying by yourself, not having a wife or husband, being single, not having children. Because that was the other part of the talk for this evening. Somebody was saying, well, there's a lot of pressure on people to have partners in this world, and sometimes if you are single, sometimes you look like you're weird. And if you think you're weird by not having a partner, have a think about what monks are like in this world. We really are weird. Not only as monks do we not have girlfriends, we actually dress like girls. Look at us. I remember a wonderful occasion where, again, it's not just going to visit these interesting people like Archbishop John Sentamu, but also that about a year or two ago I was invited to the Gay Pride breakfast at Curtin University. And of course, when you get these invitations, as a monk, you think, wow, this is weird. Yeah, I'm in for that one. So I rocked up to the Gay Pride breakfast, and I didn't actually give a speech there, but I obviously was speaking to a lot of people. And my line was at the Gay Pride breakfast, because one of the speeches they had there was that the gay community in Perth, quite obviously and quite rightly, are now accepted into the community. And a few of them were actually lamenting the fact that they are not subversive anymore. Because there was, you know what it's like, sometimes being subversive, being different, there's a sort of a little bit of a joy, like a spice in that. But of course they're accepted, they're mainstream now. And a few of them, like the Senator Giz Watson, I think she was actually lamenting the old days when it was more radical to be gay. But then I came up and said, well, you should be like me, celibate, because you can't be more deviant these days than being celibate. Which is a point there, because as a celibate you are sort of a way out of the way that people usually live their lives in these days. Because if you look at newspapers, magazines, movies, TV, I remember just even years ago when I was a student at Cambridge, we used to have our film clubs, just in the local common room. We'd hire some films and just show it for the students. And the head of the film club this semester, they gave the program for the next semesters, about 8 movies, just to show to the college kids. And when they had the write-up of what the movies are, they had something like, what was it called? Zulu, Sex and Violence in Africa. And they had some other gangster movie, Sex and Violence in New York. And some other movie, like of the war, Sex and Violence in war-torn London. It was all like sex and violence. And the fellow who actually wrote this out, it was humorous, but it was funny because he made a point. Because basically that's what the movies are all about. Either sex and violence or violence and sex. Basically. A bit of romance, but that's basically what it was all about. And when you're celibate, you're actually going in an opposite direction. You're not only celibate, but you're gentle. And that is interesting because it is challenging. To understand what I mean by challenging and why it is that if you're single, you haven't got a partner, if you're celibate and you're just not interested in these things, or if you're like deliberately poor, like our monks are, we don't have a cent to our name. It doesn't mean we haven't got any sense, but we haven't got any sense. The first time after being a monk for about 7 years, I went to visit my family in England. Everyone was very friendly, except for my brother. And I couldn't understand why he was so cold towards me. Because we were good friends. Okay, we were sort of brothers, we used to fight every now and again, but that's just 2 young men growing up together in the same small house. But we used to make up, we were good friends. Before I was a monk, we were good friends. I was the best man at his wedding, so obviously must have been quite good friends. But once I became a monk, in 7 years, when I came back to visit, it was very hard to get close to him. And when I went back to Thailand afterwards, I thought, what's gone wrong with our relationship? Why is there that distance there? And what I worked out was that I was celibate, And even though there was no meaning to challenge his lifestyle, the very fact of who I was actually confronting him. I was saying, yeah, there's something more to life than just getting married, having kids, getting a house, getting on in life in a conventional way. I was actually challenging. Basically having to make him think, or even actually look at his lifestyle. And this is one of the problems with the different types of lifestyle which we see. Not the mainstream, but those types of lifestyle which are sort of on the edge. Because sometimes I go down sometimes the street in Perth, and sometimes you might see a woman in a burqa. And you think, is that challenging? And if it is, why? Because what it's actually doing is it's challenging us to see things in a different way. It's not mainstream, it's outside of our comfort zone. Whether it's right or wrong, it's challenging. And that's one of the problems with being celibate or being single and not wanting a partner. Because what's actually happening for the other person, maybe they don't realise this, you're actually challenging their lifestyle, challenging even who they are, and saying, well, maybe you should think a bit deeper, there may be other alternatives in life. And I think that's a useful thing to be a challenger. Of course, people don't like that. They'd rather not see you. They'd rather like everybody look the same and dress the same and be the same. However, maybe it was because that I come from England. And England is a well-known home of eccentrics. And maybe that's one of the reasons I like to become a monk. At least in England you look eccentric. However, when you go to places like Thailand, you just fit in with everybody else. So it's like that story I say of when I was trying to be a radical young man. When I was about 17, I bought my first pair of green velvet trousers. They weren't like ordinary green, they were like fluorescent green. And I thought that was really being radical. None of my friends had anything so loud and vibrant and stand-outish as those my green velvet trousers. Until I went to one of these rock concerts and found another 10,000 people had the same green velvet trousers. And just another uniform, that's all it was. But sometimes when we see something different, it does challenge us. And I think that's one of the problems with celibacy, with being single, maybe not having kids. Because there's an inherent challenge for those people who have got the wife and 2 children, a nice house, a car, the good job, and a superannuation well paid up. It sort of challenges us to think outside the normal way of doing things. However, certainly the spirituality or religion has to challenge you. And sometimes I always say that if you come here and you hear what you want to hear, or you know exactly what's been said here, then there's no point coming. You want to come in here and then leave, seeing things in a slightly different way, having been challenged, having been moved forward in your understanding of yourselves and life in general. Because really, what's wrong with being single? What's wrong with being celibate? In fact, sometimes that you can see great advantages in being single or being celibate. Whatever it is, each one of us, as the monk pointed out some time ago, each one of us practices that restraint. Restraining of our sexual urges, restraining of our anger urges, restraining of our violent urges. We all have to practice some sort of restraint to a greater or lesser degree to be able to live in a civilized life. It is the nature of human beings. Girls and boys to be attracted, or if you're gay, to be attracted to the same sex. It's the nature of human beings sometimes to get upset and angry, and maybe being so frustrated you want to become violent, to prove your point, or to stand your ground, or whatever other excuses you have. Sometimes you can see those movements within your own mind, but you stop. Why do you stop? Why is it you might see that boy or that girl you really like, you say, no, I'm going to stay with the one I've got? Why is it that you get so upset sometimes you'd want to punch somebody but you don't? Why? what's actually happening there, those urges which are in that human being, there is another part of the human being which we call the ability to restrain, to be able to see the consequences of our actions and to realize, yes, that just going with those urges gives like momentary satisfaction but long-term harm and pain and difficulty.